All right, I want to welcome everyone to this session this morning. Thank you so much for coming and enjoying these inauguration ceremonies today and over the next few days. This session is called Being a Light in Education, and the abstract for this session reads, being an educator has always come with challenges, but more and more it seems that the discourse surrounding education is increasingly political, contentious, and polarizing. The number of people seeking to become an educator has dropped dramatically over the past decade, and the problem of retaining existing educators is growing such that schools all over the state are faced with substantial teacher shortages. The narrative surrounding education is desperately in need of renewed messaging regarding the tremendous calling being associated with being a teacher or an educational leader. And if ever there was a time for light to shine in the midst of a dim environment, it is now. The purpose of this session is to shine light into the narrative of being an educator who changes the lives of students and impacts the next generation. Our panelists are Janet Ayers, who's the president of the Ayers Foundation, Dr. Adrian Battle, who is head of schools for Metro Nashville Public Schools, Hank Staggs, who's the director of Accelerating Character Education Development at NIET, Chairman Mark White of the Tennessee General Assembly, and Jamie Woodson, who is the founder and principal of TriStar Strategies. And allow me now to turn this over to our moderator, who needs no formal introduction here, the honoree of these presidential inauguration ceremonies and the 18th president of Lipscomb University, Dr. Candice Mcqueen.
Thank you. Well, I have to admit, this may be my favorite panel of the day, even though I did just like the one we did. But this is like having old friends sitting in a living room, having a conversation, because these are folks that I admire and have worked with in the past. And so you're getting to hear from the best and the brightest, truly, in leading education across our state and in our city. So I'm thrilled to be with all of you. I'm going to start with the last couple of years. We've had an extraordinary shift in education over the last few years. I mean, from COVID that really did show a lot of the challenges that exist in our system, quite frankly. We've had an influx of money that has been put into that system at the same time. So it's been this really remarkable moment of challenges plus new funding. We've had all types of cultural challenges that have come to the forefront. We've had issues that have been debated on the public square, from changing names of high schools and middle schools and elementary schools to critical race theory. I mean, you name it, educators are at the front lines of debating what we would consider a lot of contentious issues. And as a matter of fact, 8 out of the 10 largest school districts have lost their superintendent over the last year and a half. And when they were interviewed, many of them said it wasn't just because I needed to retire, it was the time that we're in. I really needed to do something different. So Dr. Battle, I just love that Dr. Battle's name is Dr. Battle. I mean, it's just so appropriate. Dr. Battle and I are friends, and I'm so thrilled that you're the superintendent at Metro Nashville Public Schools, and have loved watching your career. But tell me about what this last year and a half has really been like for you. You came in right as we had tornadoes here, and you were trying to fix that, and then COVID hit. I mean, it was just an amazing moment that you walked into the door as superintendent. So be honest with us, if you can. How have you kept your focus as a new superintendent amidst all of these things this last year and a half?
Well, Dr. Mcqueen, thank you for jumping right in to the conversation this morning. And I think I want to start by reflecting on the data point that you just shared. 8 out of 10 of our superintendents of our largest school districts have now shifted away during a time when we needed the strongest leadership across our country. And for me, fortunately, that was the time in which I was transitioning in. And those colleagues and those relationships, those sharing of best practices really matters to our ability as educators to move our respective communities forward. You know, as I think about navigating the last 2 years, What we knew to be true before the pandemic and now as we're continuing to navigate throughout the pandemic is that students' educational experiences, but their health and wellness should always be the priority. We've got to make sure our students are safe. We've got to make sure that their basic needs are being met, knowing that our ultimate goal is to educate our students and to make sure that socially and emotionally they're in a space to really accelerate their learning. So it's been a challenging 2 years, but what's come out of that is now our ability to really shift and navigate various circumstances. Lots of rhetoric and conversations around what we were able to accomplish in public education for our students, but we knew from the beginning that we had to keep our focus on our students. So really limiting the distractions, which was challenging at times. I mean, we've heard all the conversations of virtual and in-person and your COVID mitigation strategies and masks and social distancing, and all of those conversations could, if you allow them, overwhelm the space that we're in education. And as a director of schools, I've chosen to take on those conversations so that our teachers could focus on teaching our students, so that our students could focus on learning. And we're so thankful for our parents because this has been a challenging time for everyone. We've asked our parents to really pick up the pieces and fill in the gaps while our students were learning virtually at home. What's most important for Metro Nashville Public Schools is that we've continued to focus on our students. We've come out of this pandemic with a focus and a motto of every student being known, because when I talked to parents, when I spoke to teachers and students, what they really wanted to know is, do you truly understand what our needs are and how are you going to be responsive to that? And through that focus, we've just recently seen in our most recent MAP scores that our students are progressing at a greater rate than they were before the pandemic. Let me say that again. So our recent MAP scores, it really demonstrates. I mean, and our students are performing at a level beyond pre-pandemic scores and growth. And so we still have a lot of work to do because we're wanting to not return to the old normal. We're looking to accelerate our learning opportunities and outcomes for all of our students.
Great. Well, you've been a light, truly, during these last several years, watching you and showing really your teachers and your faculty across every school, your staff, your leadership that's right in central office, what it means to stay focused. And so thank you for that. So Chairman White, I'm going to turn to you.
All right.
You and I have worked a good bit together on various issues, and I can say without hesitation, some of them were contentious. We weren't in contention, but usually there were contentious items that really required us to pull people from different sides of the aisle together to try to do what was best for students. And you've been at the middle of a lot of those conversations for years. So how do you, as a legislator that is a key person on education issues, how do you be a model of how you bring these different political parties together and keep the number one priority our students?
Well, thank you. I guess the first question is, do I? I don't know. And I also told Jamie, every time I get a question, we'll look at her in case she's...
Yes, Jamie could jump in and answer too.
Jump in any time.
No, you're getting all the hard ones, Mark.
Oh, thank you so much. That is, I'm so glad that I waited till later in life before I ran for office, for one thing. I think it gave me time to kind of know more who I was. My father was a pastor. He actually graduated from Lipscomb College a long time ago. And so I had a very good childhood, very good, strong upbringing and all. But that has been a challenge. And a lot of times it's keeping the self-doubt out. You know, I'm in committees and I'm going, okay, we need to go this way or that way, but am I really right? You know, am I just getting into the political discourse, or am I doing things? I wanted to run for office. I started out my career as a school teacher and then a principal, and was in business for 25 years. And I always wanted to run for office. And when I started thinking seriously about it, a lot of people says, don't do that. It will corrupt you. And I said, yes, but if a Christian doesn't get into politics, we're lost anyway. So what Governor Haslam was saying, by the way, what an excellent Senator Ackberry and Governor Haslam and yourself did on that panel. So there's a lot of, the only way that I can function every day, and this is by the way, my 13th year. It's hard to believe I've done it, have been there this long. But every morning and every night before I go to bed, you've got to spend time with your Creator. If not, politics will just eat you alive. One thing I did realize, and that's why you spend time in prayer and in scripture reading and talking, and you had to have those quiet times with yourself. Because one thing I realized, if you watch politics, a person would get in there and they will shine real bright, and then Satan will chew you up and spit you out. And that's because he built you up, and then he pulls the props out. And the only way you can really, in my opinion, to survive in politics is that you've got to have that focus on who put you there and why. And then we still make mistakes. And I go home some days and I go, why did I open my mouth? Why did I say anything in committee, you know? And so, but that's basically how we function.
Really well said. Thank you for that. Really the personal comments too. So Jamie, I am going to turn it to you. As some of you may not know, Jamie Woodson is former legislator. She's recovering from the legislature.
That's right.
But Jamie has a long storied history in education here in Tennessee, and I call her a personal friend as well. In fact, she encouraged me to be a part of Governor Haslam's administration, and I'll always appreciate you for that. So Jamie sits on the board at the University of Tennessee. She's a Vol for life. We will not hold that against you. She also sits on the Charter Commission. She, I think, is just rolling off of the Tennessee Independent Colleges and Universities Board. She was the CEO, and I say the, she'll always be my CEO of SCORE, the statewide collaborative on reforming education with Senator Bill Frist. So she has been in the middle of education policy for forever, and quite frankly is still very involved. So I'm curious from your perspective, what are you most excited about that's happening in education, and what most concerns you? You've seen it now over a span of time. What are you excited about, and what concerns you?
So first, I'm so honored to be here. This is very fun. This morning has been fantastic. If you all weren't at breakfast, and the first panel is just a reminder of why we all should feel called to participate in our way in public service and in the public forum. So I'm going to start with what concerns me, because I always like to finish with the exciting parts, and there's a lot more to be excited about than there is to be concerned about. But for me, it's what fuels my sense of urgency in service and my urgency in education. I'm really concerned about students right now. COVID and a lot of just in our republic, there's a lot of chaos in our republic, but COVID and systems change has created an environment where we've seen historic learning loss for kids. It is amazing that Superintendent Battle is articulating that we're actually seeing pre-COVID gains. That's not coming out in the data yet. And so right now, what we see are 10 years of historic gains being wiped out in a single year, the first year of COVID. We're seeing real challenges that students are facing with trauma outside of the classroom. And so that concerns me. What I'm excited about is Tennessee knows how to solve big problems at scale. Candice, you were at the tip of the battlefront, right? During times where we had massive systems change. We changed the conversation instead of why we were at the bottom of states and how were we going to ensure that students have the supports that they need to be the fastest improving in the country over multiple years, multiple cohorts, multiple subject areas. And so Tennessee knows how to lead at scale and to see systems change. And so in that, I'm excited. We also know how to stay focused on what really works for kids. We know that early literacy matters. We know that post-secondary readiness matters. We know that high-dosage tutoring is incredibly helpful for students. We know how important it is to have great teaching taking place every minute of the school day. And so I think we know as a state how to stay focused on what matters. We're also seeing historic investments in student success. And I will say that we've got a member of the legislature here. What a tremendous responsibility to say, you know, we do this in families, right? Our pocketbooks reflect, and how we spend our resource reflect our values. The same thing with government. How we expend our resources tells a lot about our values. And for the last 2 decades, the Tennessee General Assembly, the executive branch, have prioritized education in severe recessions when other budgets were getting cut, Tennessee made different choices, and right now, at a time where there are more resources than we've seen in recent days, Chairman White is trying to have a conversation about how do we put students at the center of our funding values, and how do we make sure that we use our students as the center of the conversation instead of the systems and the adults in the room. And I think that's really important. So for all of those reasons, I'm excited. Last one is, this is a time where you could sort of be crippled under the crisis. We're seeing innovations happen all across the state. We're seeing educators leaning in massive ways, and they're doing it. They're getting more creative. They're changing their format to deliver where students are instead of where we might hope they are. And students are responding, real-time data from Nashville. They're responding as they have for many, many years in Tennessee. If we support them, they're going to do great things. So lots to be excited about.
Great, thank you. And thank you for the balance, man. I think that's right. The things that we should be focused on are the right things, but we still have challenges that we're trying to overcome. So Janet, I don't even know where to begin. Janet is the president of the Ayers Foundation and maybe one of the most significant education philanthropists in our state. She and Jim Ayers, who started First Bank, are critical voices for education and certainly have been real partners with Lipscomb, and so we appreciate that you're here, Janet. Janet, you have done remarkable things with multiple counties where you are making sure that our students have last dollar scholarships to go on and go to college. So you've impacted literally thousands of high school students who might not otherwise get a chance to go to college with your gifts and the way you have counseled through your own counseling program. So I'm curious from your perspective, you're sitting on a lot of committees now too, what are you most excited about and what troubles you the most? But same question as Jamie, but you have a little different perspective, I know.
Well, I'm first going to be like Jamie in that I'm very honored to be here, and I am so excited, Candice, that you are here. And I was just looking at Jamie, and I said the first inaugural class of Leadership Tennessee, 3 of us are sitting here together.
That's right.
So it feels good to be here, me back on the campus of Lipscomb, where I first met you all those years ago. A little backstory about Candice and our relationship before I answer that question is...
Oh, no, I don't know where you're going, but okay. We'll see.
She approached me, Jim Ayers might kill me for this because it kind of sets up for other things, but Dr. Battle, she approached me for about a $30,000 grant for a particular school literacy program. And I'm like, I'm not real sure that I want to do something that small.
And I said, well, we've got bigger ideas.
Yes, we did. She did. And so we started developing a friendship and a conversation, so that $30,000 ask became a $2 million gift in a very short period of time. Candice, you're very compelling. But I say that to set the stage, and I'm going to start with what concerns me the most, my fear, and I'll end with what I'm encouraged about. And I say that really to set the stage is that I think what I have the greatest fear about is the emotional adult politics that dominates our conversations, that sucks the air out of the room when you should be focusing on that student. And we're spending a gazillion dollars on education and moving the needle just a little bit, because while the adults are playing not nicely together, the students are being lost. And to each person that's already spoken, and I will put myself right there in that group, everyone to a person has said the student needs to come first. So that's my greatest fear, is that we're in this moment of time when the adults can't get out of their own way and they're forgetting what we're fighting for, and they're throwing yet more unprecedented resources into the mix of things. I've learned firsthand that money alone doesn't solve everything, and with these financial resources comes a great responsibility. And we historically have shown how you can spend a lot of money and not move the needle. And if you can take some resources and think big and do it responsibly, you can change everything. And I do think the state of Tennessee has done a great job of doing that, being able to balance those two. But that's my biggest fear, is the adults won't get out of the way and put the students first, and that we'll spend unprecedented amount of money and not move the needle at all. My greatest hope is, and what I get excited about and what the future is that what's happened over the last couple of years is something that the people that have been in the trenches for years and years and years knew were issues. And they've been fighting this very private battle almost of, the resources we need, where our focus needs to be. Most of the counties that we support, and I will have to say it's not our scholarships, we don't do it in all the schools, we have scholarships, but our counselors that are embedded in the schools but not part of that system that counsel those students through, to a teacher, to an administrator, to everyone that's there, they will tell you those pressure points and where they're struggling. Senator White, I think it's great that you all are taking on, Representative, that you are taking on this battle of student-focused funding, what that looks like. So what excites me is what happened when COVID hit and the pandemic hit. Those people that were quietly, tirelessly giving up their own family time could have told you these pressure points. COVID put a laser focus on those pressure points. So what excites me is we're in this point in time in history of where we can take that laser focus and we can really drill down and go back to getting the students and the people that are in those trenches, the teachers, the principals, the counselors, the parents, everyone. I think our parent voice is probably stronger than it's ever been. So what excites me is that we now are really, as a state, as a country, are seeing that we have these pockets of just left behinds. One group I represent is rural, and they've been really left behind. So I'm excited about that we're not just talking about pre-K through 12 in a group. We're not just talking about post-secondary and higher education in a group. We're not talking about just economic development in a group. Is that we really are starting to see how everything ebbs and flows together. And what I'm seeing with our own work is that one is important to feed all of the rest of it. If they'd had Dr. Tom as a parent, they would have figured this out. He knew all along when he was sending me to school it was to get me off of his payroll. It's not hard to figure out in our own household, but is that the technology divide, the internet divide that I see in the rural communities are being addressed if we handle this responsibly. That with Blue Oval City and the pandemic and place, sense of place and home and community matters. And all of a sudden there's a way to blend all of this together so that for us what excites us and what we see in our work is we've been in the business of taking these rural students and getting them to and through post-secondary at unprecedented rates. When we say 90% of our students are continuing their education, it is 90% of every single student that's a senior that are continuing their education. But more importantly, over 80% are actually completing. But what we have just now really realized is to complete that loop, and what COVID and Sense of Place did was made us really drill down and realize we need to figure out that this is really about economic development and how we can bring these students back to these rural communities if they so choose, and that wherever you decide to live, work, and play, that it all ties together. Silos are no longer okay. And that's what excites us, and that's where I see our future. And I think we have this moment in time. We just need to be responsible with what we do with it.
And thank you for representing the rural community needs as well. So Hank, I want to circle to you, and I want you to just know in the audience we have a variety of prospective students or students who are in some of our programs at the graduate and undergraduate. And so I know you have been in education a long time, from being a principal, being a teacher, going into higher education. You were right here at Lipscomb for a time in our graduate programs, and then you went to the State Department. I took him away, and he came to the State Department and did work, and then now works with the National Institute for Excellence in Teaching. You see a lot of real stories of real children on the ground doing amazing things. Can you tell some stories that would energize our folks here about what's really happening that's good in our classrooms today?
Sure. And like the others, thank you for this invitation to be here. This is such a great group. And I look around the room and see friends and experts, and such an honor to be on this panel. When I got the invitation, my first thought was, that's great, because now I'll be sure to get a seat in the room. So thank you for that. Yeah, the first word that comes to mind is resilience. And, I mean, we're seeing resilience everywhere we go. And it's so encouraging and so exciting. Principals are being resilient, teachers are being resilient, and you're right. I mean, the headline out there right now is not positive. I mean, it's about the downturn in the number of people going into the profession. It's about the downturn in the number of people, how many open spots we have and how many teachers we're looking for. But think about, there's way more that are staying in the profession. There are way more that are being resilient and staying with it. And principals are tested, they really are. But I tell you, just last week, I sat with the principal and he was telling me the story and I got to see this. I actually took a picture of it, of his laundry closet. And just a real simple example. So something he's done is he's made a laundry closet. He asked the district for a washer and dryer. And so he washes clothes and has a coat rack. And it's very touching. He has a coat rack. And on that rack, it says, if you need a coat, take a coat. If you find your coat, take your coat. Once you use a coat and don't need it anymore, then put it back in this basket. And then below it said, all the coats on the rack have been washed and are clean. And that's real. That was last week. Something else, Thursday, I was at a school and I got there early and I was at the drop-off line, right? And of course, for one, I've seen principals stand out in the rain. I mean, how many of your jobs do you stand out in the rain, right? Well, principals are doing that. They're still doing that. It wasn't raining Thursday. Good for me, because I was out there. But Thursday, there were two gentlemen out there, and we were greeting students, coming off the bus. And the students had no idea who I was. But they were coming up, giving me hugs. And it spoke to me that they are happy that I'm here. And not me, Hank. They were happy that an adult is there. An adult is caring about them. And that's what those teachers and principals are doing every day. They are providing that every day. Something that, you just have to stop me because I can go on and on.
You can do one more.
Okay. Something else I saw that was great is, and this also happened last week, things are coming back to normal, if it's okay to say it that way. And this one school was so excited for their art extravaganza. And it's a K-8 school, and every student in that building does a piece of art, and they post that, and they have like an art night, right? And this is the first time that they're able to do that in 3 years. And so I just happened to be there on the day that they were setting up for this. And it was amazing. I mean, hey, we have the Frisk Center, and it's great, but I would put this school up against that. I mean, in that moment, and it was energized, and so I'm meeting people, and the principal is talking about this, and so I'm meeting the PTO coordinator, and I'm meeting volunteers, and they at this particular school and in this district, they have what they call a grandparent volunteer something, and to where retired folks from the community come in and serve as grandparents, and I got to meet some of those folks. But all of those folks are working together on this art project that was just amazing. Unfortunately, I couldn't go back that night to see it, but it was so inspiring. And I do have to say one more.
Sure.
And that is from Chairman White. Something else that's happening, principals are praying. They really are. You may not see that, but behind closed doors, they are praying, and they're praying like they have never prayed before. And I've coached principals, and I've been with principals for a long time, but in the last year, I've had more conversations about spirituality and calling on a higher power and relying on their faith and prayer more than I have in the last 30 years.
Well, that goes to this next question, which I'm going to have a lightning round. I've got several questions, and I want anyone who wants to answer to jump in. So we know that there have been these headlines about not becoming a principal, not becoming a teacher, and it's cast in a negative light. We know this is what sells papers, right? We all know that, and so you tend to sort of cast it in that light. But there's some truth behind that. We've had declining numbers of people making decisions to go in education, which breaks my heart because it is the best profession in the world. And so how do we recast our profession of teaching and education as this desirable calling that you have? Because it truly is a calling. And how do we recast it as a purposeful calling for people that can be extraordinarily fulfilling if you give it a chance. So what do you think, Chairman White?
Yeah. I'm so glad that I started my career out as a teacher because I think it taught me so much. And by the way, y'all are all seventh graders. I taught seventh grade, started out. I love seventh graders. But it gave me such an appreciation for the mind of a young person. And I think, it is a tough job now. We know because, breakdown of the homes and so many children are coming ill-prepared for school and things like that. So it is a very tough position. But to get to stand in front of people, I taught school back in the 70s, okay, 50 years ago now, or 40 to 50. I still have communication with those seventh graders today, and they're even at their age. So you never lose sight of that. So it's an honorable profession. It's great, and just to be able to relate to young people. My wife says the reason boys were good, I never got past 13 myself, and so that's okay with me. I'm quite happy. But I think we need to push the next generation, saying it's a great profession, and to work with a young person, the young mind, is just so rewarding.
Dr. Battle?
As I think about this question, I reflect back as a young person growing up here in Nashville. And if you've heard anything about my story, you know that I remember as early as third grade wanting to be a teacher, not a director of schools, a teacher. And I think about that as I hear all the conversations that are happening and all the narratives. And I'll just be real. There are not educators who go into this great profession who doesn't want the best for students. There's not a librarian. There's not a support staff person. There's not a bus driver, right? We're all here because we care about our young people and we know the difference that it can make in all of our lives. In fact, those of you who are here studying and aspiring to be in education, come and see us. Come and talk to us because we are a district serious about educating all of our students. But our conversations have to change. They have to change. We have to make sure that we're valuing our educators and all of the hard work that they do daily. We have to make sure that we're compensating our educators for the great work that they do. And we're very fortunate because we've had a historic investment in our educators just this budget cycle to make them the best paid educators in the state. But there is still more that has to be done. Compensation matters, but also the value that we place on our educators and our community matters. I remember back in March of 2020 when the tornadoes came through. And I was very new on the job, but I learned very quickly that the city relied upon our educators and our system to be responsive to the needs of not only our students, but our families. Educators matter. It matters not only when we're talking about moving into the profession, it matters in our partnerships of what's happening in higher education. It matters what's happening in our schools. For instance, we're home to 2 teaching academies right here in MNPS, and we're doing everything we can right now to continue to inspire those young people to go into this profession that really can give you the biggest difference, make the biggest difference in the lives of all of our students, regardless of the profession that they enter. How many professions can you say that about? And so again, we've got to compensate them, we've got to value them, and make sure they have the right conditions to thrive.
Well said. Anything else from the 3 of you?
I'd like to just build on Dr. Battle's comment. I personally believe that, the research is really clear. If we want to support students and we want students at the center of our work, ensuring that we have great teaching occurring, that's the number one lever in school, right? Like that's number one. Number 2 is a great principal. And so for me, I think putting the importance of that and the gravity of that into how we talk about the profession, I think is important. And I could not agree more that treating teachers as the professionals that they are is priority 1. I think that's one of the things, and I really appreciated Janet's comment about the thoughtfulness that we should have in how these new resources are spent, federal resources, state resources, local resources. As we think about how we show our values, Tennessee has the opportunity to be the leader in the South in teacher pay. We have that opportunity, and our leaders are focusing in the right direction to make sure that we're raising teachers up in that way. I also just want to call out being a great teacher and having a highly engaged instructional experience for a child, that is hard work. And for students, they have lots of choices with what they could do with their time. There was a day, and it was just ahead of my day, but like nursing and teaching, those were the two options for women. And to me, it is, to be great, it is hard. And I think that there's one of the many cool things about the generation from the geriatric millennial. I'm a Gen Xer, but from the geriatric millennials to the students who are coming up right now, the two things that I see so much in them are that they're incredibly mission focused. Like, they want to make a difference in the world. They don't want to just sort of float around. And two, they don't want to just do things that they feel called to and that they want it to make an impact. They want a system to change. They want to make sure that their place in the world is kind of stamped out and that they're doing something bigger than themselves. And what more important profession than teaching for someone to not only make, I think of the people who influenced me in my life. I mean, the lion's share of those folks are members of faculty, either K-12 teachers who influenced me to higher education faculty. I mean, I wouldn't be sitting in this room if it weren't for folks who said, you got to focus all this energy in a productive way, Jamie. and then they helped me do that. And so I just think it's one of the most important things that we can do, and we've got to invest in it, and we've got to show that value in how we treat these important professionals.
I'm going to be real succinct, but I want to jump in there. Being the daughter of an educator and a long line of educators is you put your money where your mouth is and you show your values. And whether you are a professional ball player, an attorney, a doctor, or whomever you may be, you are touched by a teacher. And we need to start recognizing that teaching is a profession that touches everyone. And whether you're a rural community, a suburban area, or an urban area, your teachers are the front line for everyone. So when I hear about frontline workers, teachers need to be at the head of the list because they're touching everything. And we need to start putting our resources, and it's not just the compensation, but is right up there, but it's also the support about the teaching and the training and all the stuff that it takes to be a great teacher. But there is, to Jamie's point, there's no one in any profession, walk of life, anywhere in this country that has not been touched by a teacher. And we need to change that narrative.
Very well said. Thank you for that. So next question, Dr. Bell, I think I'll start with you on this question. What do you think our students need the most in a post-pandemic world?
Support,
Okay.
and support in every way. When we're thinking academically, when we're thinking about their social emotional learning, their mental health, their journey to and beyond graduating high school, post-secondary workforce, that support has to be there. And it's not just about the support with the classroom teacher, it's the community support, it's the partnerships that have to exist. And I mean, I look across the panel here and I can think about all the partnerships and opportunities that we've been able to sit around the table and plan around to meet the needs of our students. It takes innovation. I think that was spoken of earlier. While we have a great investment in education right now, it's about us being innovative. It's about us breaking down those barriers and those walls that we generically place there sometimes to make sure that our students have what they need. So the support and innovation, it will take every bit of that to make sure that every student, regardless of the community that they're learning in, has what they need to excel.
Chairman White, what would you add to that?
I guess I would say my constant thought is that every child has an adult who's an adult. To have either a good parent in the home, or I wrote a book a number of years ago about the importance of fathers in the home. That's one thing we need. We could change 95% of the problems in education if we could put two good parents in every home. Well, we got to legislate, so that's sometimes outside our realm. But children, I believe that children, one reason I love to work with children so much, I think children are far wiser than adults. And that's a gift that God gave them. You think about a child that's in say a dysfunctional home, and that child usually is the one that gets the kids up in the morning to go to school, and to try to get the adult in the home that may be dysfunctional for whatever reason and say, you need to get their siblings to school, they take on the role of an adult. But in a situation, and then they've got to grow up like that and they lose their childhood. But if you're in a home where you have two good parents or one good parent or at least a responsible adult, you have the freedom to be a child. And that's so important that you can be a child and you can go through the levels and the ages of. I was talking to Janet a while ago. I grew up in Naples and she was just down there, which is where my formative year, Naples, Florida, where my formative years were. And we all know this. I would get on my bicycle at 8 o'clock in the morning in the summer. I'd come back home for 5 o'clock. My parents didn't, this was in the, I hate to say how old I am, but this is in the late 50s and 60s. And you'd come back home at 5 o'clock. And we had the total freedom to be a child. And I hope there's still places like that in our communities today. But if adults will be the adult and let a child protect that child so they can grow up, I think is what we need mostly.
Hank, would you add anything?
Absolutely. I just had a principal tell me last week, in my school, I want the culture to be one to where the kids don't have to be adults. And I think you're exactly right. I would add to that too, we need adults to be adults and we need adults to model character. Social emotional learning and character is what I would add and answer your question simply as that. If we can have our adults to model it, if we can teach social emotional skills so that we can get along in community and so that we can have a character and teach our students so they can develop their own character. But without the adults modeling that, the chances of it happening are really slim.
Jamie?
I can't be on a panel with Candice Mcqueen and not say, have high expectations.
Good answer, Jamie Woodson.
Our kids have shown us so many times, if we have high expectations of them, they will meet or exceed our high expectations. If we add the supports that they need, the social, emotional, having adults ensure that systems are surrounding an individual child instead of the system pulling the child, I just think it really matters. And we've seen what that looks like. We've seen having high expectations, providing support, making sure adults focus conversations around students and what students need. We've seen Tennessee go from the bottom of states into the top half of states in a very short window of time, and we've seen Tennessee students sustain that historic progress over multiple years. So to me, it's if we expect more, they absolutely will be able to achieve more and provide those important supports.
Students, did you hear that? She said, bring your best, in other words, right? Okay, we've been talking about that here. So I'm a last question for the panel, and I hope you will take this one to heart, so I'll let you have some private think time. We like to do that in education. I want you to consider the audience. These are people who all are invested in education, some higher education, some lower education, but certainly across the spectrum. What advice, think of advice, that you would give to this group to stay motivated, excited, passionate, hopeful about what they have in front of them as educators? What's that advice? What helps you hold that passion and really hold on to being a light as an educator? Jamie, you look like you might have an answer, so.
Candice and I were in a convening one time, and we were trying to solve some big systemic policy questions, and I was ready to just jump in with my answer immediately, and she was like, well, perhaps we should have some private think time, Jamie. And so she knows I'm going to be really jacked up about these kinds of conversations, and I should always take her advice. But I think the first thing that I would say, and I'll just have one, is do not grow weary doing good work. What you're doing is generational positive change. It starts with an individual child. But what we know clearly, that if a student goes through their formal educational process and we create a lifelong learner, they're going to be able to thrive and participate in this American Republic. They're going to have choice and mobility and options. And so what you're doing is the most important job, and there are going to be really challenging days. And they will string together, and you will feel like you are chewing glass every single day. And that glass should taste sweet, because what you're doing is creating a future for individuals so they can thrive and they can have the family and the place and the life that they want because they have the tools that they need, and you've been a material contribution to that. Do not grow weary.
Thank you. Galatians 5, I love it. What about you, Janet?
This one will be short. You don't know but what you were not made for a time such as this. And if you woke up every single day and put that in the front of you, you will change the lives one person at a time.
Well, we have Galatians 5 and Esther. I mean, it doesn't get much better than that. So thanks to both of you. Chairman White?
Got one? Yeah, I do have one. And since this is the last question, I just want to say publicly how thrilled I am that you're the president.
Thank
of this.
you.
I
Thank
haven't had a
you.
chance to say that publicly. I just think we got such great days ahead. I think what we need to keep in mind is, I love history, and I like to think about timelines. You tell me one time in history it hadn't been tough. Think about the generation that grew up in the 1930s, 10 years of depression. To come out of that generation of 18-year-olds went off to Germany or the Pacific for the next 4 years. And a lot of them didn't come home. So you tell me, and we've gone through some tough educational years, but we'll move on. Every generation does. And so let's just don't get bogged down into the troubles of the day, which in many ways are kind of light compared to what past generations, Look at the children of Ukraine. They're going to lose years. I see these sweet little faces with backpacks on over there, going to another country from their home that is, so every generation, every important time in history, it's been tough. And so, but that's where your faith comes in. Keep moving.
Yes, I'm utilizing my think time. And I remember in my trainings coming up, hearing a quote that the great thing about education is that it matters every day. The hard thing, the challenging thing about education is that it matters every day. And what I would share and encourage you to do is to get out into a school. In fact, every Monday morning and multiple times throughout the week, except for today, I start my day out in our schools. Because when you see our students, when you see them engage, when you can feel that light bulb going off and the teacher energized because that lesson they plan is translating into learning for students, you will have goosebumps, you will be inspired, you will see the other side of the narrative that's being created about the capabilities and the high expectations we have for our students. So get out into schools, talk to a teacher, talk to a student, help create a path for student success. So when you think about one of the innovations we talked about earlier, just briefly, we're a district that's investing in high impact tutoring for our students. We're calling it our Accelerating Scholars Program. We have opportunities for you 30 minutes a day, 3 times a week, to sit and talk with a student, be their inspiration, be that adult in their life that believes in them, that cares about them, and can help connect their learning to their future aspirations. So get out into a school and really see what's happening and then spread the word.
All right, Hank, you get the final word.
All right, and I've had the longest think time too. So. I would say to you guys, know your why. Identify your why, write that down. Some people call that a noble purpose. What is your noble purpose for showing up every day? Write that down, think about that, pray over that, and take that with you every day. That's extremely important. Last thing I would say to sort of keep the theme here is maintain the unity of spirit and the bond of peace.
Well said. Well, several years ago, there was a little bitty book that you could find, on the shelf of Barnes & Noble that was called What Does a Teacher Make? And I picked it up and bought it. I didn't even know what it was going to be about. That sounded interesting. What does a teacher make? And it's very easy read. And this person was asking a question that they got asked a lot. Well, what does a teacher make? Meaning money, right? How much the salary? Why are you doing this? What does a teacher make? It was always in that tone. And she wrote the book about, well, what does a teacher make? And it was they make new lives. They make new opportunities. They make a future for students. They make the world a better place. And every small chapter was about all the different things a teacher makes. And I love that concept. A teacher truly gives light. Gives light to students who may not have opportunities. They may not know what their next meal is. They may not know what the next day or the afternoon will look like for them. But a teacher, that smile, that voice, that care, that education, bringing your best, it really does matter. And so thank you for those of you in this room who I know are here because you're educators. You love the profession of teaching. You may be moving into it yourself. You may have been in it for years. But stay motivated. Be hopeful for the future because you're doing amazing things. And truly, these are inspirations up on this panel of folks who've been part of this work for years and are making a difference every day. You're making opportunities for kids, and we really appreciate that. Let's give this panel a big hand. I think I get the final word, and so I will take the final word and say thank you all for coming. And I appreciate if you want to come up and say hello to the panelists and get to know them for a few minutes. I hope you have a few minutes during transition. And we do have an 11 o'clock panel if some of you are attending that. So thank you very much. Appreciate it.
And congratulations again to you, Dr. McQueen.
Thank you. Thank you.